Good afternoon. Our next speaker, Linda Zimmerman, is a research chemist turned award-winning author of 30 books on science, history, the paranormal, and fiction. She's lectured across the country and has appeared on numerous television and radio shows. Linda starred in the documentary In the Night Sky, I Recall a UFO, which was based on her research into sightings in the Hudson Valley of New York. Here to talk about the Hudson Valley UFO sightings, a century of UFO sightings, Linda Zimmerman.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. I thank MUFON for giving me the opportunity to speak about a topic that I not only have a great intellectual curiosity for, but a great personal interest in as well, as I have spent my entire life in the Hudson Valley, growing up surrounded by stories of UFOs and actually having a couple of sightings myself. So some of you may be familiar with the Hudson Valley, at least the flap of the 1980s, but what I'm going to present today goes far beyond the 1980s to really an entire century of sightings. So without further ado, I will jump in. I had never planned on doing a UFO book. I hadn't planned on a lot of things in my life, actually, but that's life. I started my career as a research chemist, and I enjoyed writing about local history and science. And when I'd give a lecture somewhere in the Hudson Valley, people would come up to me with their UFO stories. And I said, well, that's very interesting, but I don't do UFOs. Well, after about 15 or 20 years of hearing these stories, I said, it's time I do UFOs, because this just went so far beyond what even I had known growing up. So the first book was In the Night Sky, came out a couple of years ago. And as I started my research, I decided to contact a production company that was in the Hudson Valley. And I thought maybe we could have a 10-minute companion video that we can just put on YouTube, something to drum up interest and maybe get more people to come forward. Well, you know, great oaks grow from little acorns, and that 10-minute companion video became a 2-DVD full-length set. And we actually were fortunate enough to win the People's Choice Award at the EBE Film Festival at the UFO Congress in 2013. And of course, with that success came more people out of the woodwork wanting to tell their stories, which is why the second book, Hudson Valley UFOs, came out. And people tell me I have to write a third because they want their story told as well. So I am working on a third, who knows how many more, but it just goes to speak to this incredible scope of the generations of sighting by so many tens of thousands of people over the years. I will leave this up to you, but in my personal opinion, I think the Hudson Valley over the last century has been the #1 hotspot in the United States. So it's open to interpretation. I will let you draw your own conclusions, but that is the premise that I have been working on. One thing I made a great mistake when I first started doing this research was I assumed everybody knew where the Hudson Valley was. My first presentation several years ago, people were saying, oh yeah, I know the Hudson Valley. It's Wyoming, isn't it? Isn't that somewhere in Florida? You name it. I said, okay, I'm going to start with a very simple map, New York. Basically from New York City up to Albany, the counties that are on either side of the Hudson River. But I do want to clarify that a lot of these sightings, particularly some of the largest sightings on any given night, would also spill over into northern New Jersey and western Connecticut and sometimes western Massachusetts as well. Obviously, these were not isolated incidents. If a UFO was traveling 1,000 miles that night, it was going to be seen over a wide range. But for the most part, what I'll be speaking about tonight and what I focus on are the ones that are actually in the Hudson Valley. When I was a child, I was, of course, fascinated by UFOs. I think everybody was. Science fiction movies, you name it. But UFOs, to me, were always things that happened in somebody else's backyard. And then I picked up a Frank Edwards book. I think it was Flying Saucers, Serious Business. And there was this photograph taken at Lake Tirati in 1966. Now, Lake Tirati was where my family went just about every Saturday or Sunday in the summer. We would picnic, we would fish, we would rent a boat. And all of a sudden, you can imagine a little kid seeing this image of this, it was described as a coppery-shaped disc, maybe 18, 20 feet in diameter. And I was amazed. I was blown away. This was my backyard now, not some distant land. And the story that came out was this man was fishing by the name of Vincent Perna, he and his brother. He had a little Brownie camera, remember the little Brownie film cameras in his tackle box. He took a series of 4 photographs. When he brought it to the local newspaper and police, they suggested, these were such remarkable images, that he go to bring it to the Air Force Base. At the time, we have Stewart International Airport now, which also has an Air National Guard unit, but back then it was an actual Air Force base. Now this man is voluntarily going there with his photos and negatives. They proceed to inject the man with sodium pentothal and try to discredit him in every way possible. And they're not able to do it because he's telling the truth. I saw this object. I'm not telling you what it is. I just took these photos. So since they weren't able to personally discredit him, they concluded that these objects on this series of 4 photos was nothing more than a blob of developing fluid that happened to show up as a coppery-shaped disc on 4 consecutive negatives. So this was a great influence. This was a turning point in my young life. We had UFOs in my virtual backyard. We had government cover-ups. We had conspiracies. We had all the great elements that would hook a young mind into the field of ufology. I tried to start pushing back this phenomena as far as I could, and I actually came across a series of articles from 1909 involving mysterious airships. Now, you're probably all familiar with the mysterious airships in California and Texas in the 1890s, and I hadn't been aware until recently of our own mysterious airships, a decade or so later. But before I describe what was happening, I think it's important to know what was the state of aviation at the time. This plane on the top here, you can see it's one of the Wright brothers. He's talking to somebody in the Army. He just sold this little stick-and-fabric plane to the Air Force for $30,000. That is $30,1909. To give you an idea, the average wage was 22 cents an hour, and the average worker made about $300 a year. So this was quite a remarkable fortune he made. So this was the Army's first airplane, state-of-the-art. It could go about 42 miles an hour, top speed, and could stay aloft maybe about an hour, but I read several accounts where the wise pilot would strap a canoe to the bottom, because if he were to be going over water, chances are he would be needing that canoe to get back home. The dirigible on the bottom here was a pretty pathetic example compared to the Zeppelins in Europe. This was the SC-1 with a top speed of about 20 miles an hour. It could stay aloft maybe 2 hours. The important thing in 1909, no airplanes had lights and no airplanes had yet flown at night. I believe the first night flight was in Buenos Aires in about 1910. So then how do we explain these mysterious airship sightings? It flies only at night and keeps folks up in Orange County. They were seeing a light that was moving from town to town. There was another one from the Newburgh Journal that was saying the airship was seen swooping. It was over the top of a mountain. People on the other, it was on the Hudson River. People across the river for hours were watching these lights just kind of swooping back and forth and slowly rising. There really wasn't anything we had that could stay aloft for that period of time, and as I said, there were no aircraft yet carrying lights. These sightings continued throughout New England, up through the Boston area, down to New York City. By the end of the year, thousands of people throughout the Northeast had seen these mysterious airships, or at least these mysterious lights at night. Now, nobody said they were extraterrestrials. Some people today said it was a product of mass hysteria. Well, what were they hysterical about? They thought the Wright brothers or Thomas Edison had invented some new aircraft, and they were excited for sure because they wanted to see this great advance in technology. Now, when I was doing my research, going through all the microfilm, I came across this article here, and the title caught my eye, "Human Volcano Erupts." I was like, well, I have to see what this is all about. And it turns out, to my knowledge, it is the first UFO-related arrest. And I will just read this to you. Otto Pushman, Newburgh's champion cusser, had been sent to jail for 30 days for using sulfurous language. During the nocturnal hours of Tuesday, he was discovered on Grand Street looking for that ding-blasted airship that the Newburgh papers tell about and cursing fervently at the blankety-blanked moon. So here's a man standing, probably slightly inebriated, standing on a street corner in the middle of the night, cursing his head off. He wanted to see this mysterious airship, and for that, he was thrown in jail for 30 days. The New York papers started picking up on these. I found one article that said the great airship mystery is solved. It was actually little Johnny Smith flying his kite in Central Park. And I started to get a little steamed. And then I found this, which I believe was in the New York Sun. If you see a mysterious airship, well, it's probably Santa Claus, and you see he's carrying a lantern there, and, that's what you saw. Or maybe it's Baby New Year coming to see. So here, 100 years ago, we have thousands of credible eyewitnesses over the course of at least 6 months, up and down the East Coast, and the newspaper is ridiculing everybody and making fun of it. So all the elements that frustrate us today were already in place 100 years ago. All right, the question everyone's always wants to know, the government, what did they know and when did they know it? I decided to pull out a few cases just to illustrate that, at least in the Hudson Valley, the government knew a lot, and they knew it early, and they knew it for many decades. This gentleman here, Hank Vanderbeck, was a corrections officer his entire life, and as he pointed out to me, we are trained to observe everything. If you work in a prison, you watch everything. Well, as a younger boy, he and his brother and some friends were playing. This was 1953 in the town of Saugerties, New York. And you can see he's standing by a baseball field here, and he's holding up a little piece of artwork he had done. It was a beautiful, sunny, warm day. They're all playing, and suddenly one of the boys says, what is that? Look up. And this is the painting he did for me. He said there was a cigar-shaped object, tapered at both ends, at least 300 feet long, with a series of circular, it was the 1950s, so he described them as hula hoops of light that were at least 50 feet in diameter, alternating red and green. Well, this is 1953. They weren't thinking aliens. They're thinking Russian bomb. Kids are running home getting their mothers. Their mothers are coming out screaming, the Russians are attacking. They call the local police. The police see this. What are they going to do? So they call Stewart Air Force Base. About 20 minutes later, this object has not moved, not an inch in all that time. 3 fighter jets come roaring up the Hudson Valley. So you can imagine the paranoia this caused up and down the Hudson Valley. And as they're approaching this object, everybody's expecting at any moment that they're actually going to fire upon it. It moves ever so slightly, and he said in a blink of an eye, it just went absolutely gone. Just a tiny little speck, and then disappeared. The next day, of course, the newspaper had to answer for this because, you know, it's the Cold War, and why are we scrambling fighter jets in the Hudson Valley of New York? No reason to panic, populace. It was only a weather balloon. I was fortunate enough to have a man from the Air Force approach me and tell me that in 1968 he was working at Stewart Air Force Base in the Sage building. And this is this massive blockhouse of a facility here. And I said, well, what does SAGE stand for? He said, oh, well, that's semi-automated ground environment. I said, I know you think you're helping. I said, I still have no clue. What it was a radar installation in a national network that covered the entire country. In fact, if you feel like it, you can read up on SAGE. There was more manpower and more money expended in this SAGE network than there was in the Manhattan Project. So nothing flew through U.S. airspace without a SAGE facility picking it up and tracking it across the country. He said one night they're all sitting at their stations and suddenly somebody gets very excited. Now, when you have your finger on the nuclear arsenal, when somebody gets excited, it's something to pay attention to. Well, one of the SAGE facilities down south picked up an object traveling at about the height of airlines, where airline traffic is, only this thing was traveling at a stunning, remarkable, inexplicable rate of speed. They knew it wasn't ours, they knew it wasn't the Russians, and they watched this thing, tracked it fully across the country until it disappeared. He said they spoke about this for months, for years, that was the night everybody in that building knew that there was something out there. So once again, obviously the government knew about it. There wasn't anything in the papers. Of course, they weren't about to publicize that. And this SAGE building still does exist. It's gutted now. I hope they do preserve it. I think it should be turned into a UFO museum. What do you think? This is a story I have not even written about yet. This is unpublished. It's come to me so recently. I didn't realize that major airports have plane spotters, trained individuals who look to try to identify civilian, military, and commercial aircraft, then match the tail numbers to what the transponder is telling them. Sounds simple enough. Why would they want to do that? Because people like drug dealers would steal a plane, change the tail number, and be stupid enough to fly into a major airport like LaGuardia with a plane full of drugs and think nobody would notice. So that was her job, to identify these aircraft by their, if it was at night, by their configuration of lights, and when it was within range, get the tail number. And she said over the years they caught many people. So she identified aircraft for a living. She was near Westchester County Airport in 1983, and she and her mother were coming back from shopping, and she comes over a hill, and she says there's a massive object taking up the entire sky. Lights all around it, clearly nothing she had ever seen in her life, nothing she thought we could possibly even create ourselves. So she knew the man who worked at the radar tower at Westchester. She called him up. She said, I'm in such and such a location. What do you see? And he starts yelling, we see it, we see it. It's massive. We have no idea what it is. Very excited. She says, well, I'll come in tomorrow. I want to keep following this thing. We'll talk about it. Next morning, she pulls into the parking lot, and this radar man is running around the parking lot like a crazy man. And she says, what the heck is he doing? He was waiting for her. As soon as she pulled in, he ran up and said, it was a flock of birds. I'm telling you, it was a flock of birds. Don't say anything. We'll lose our jobs or worse. She's like, you know, what are you talking about? You said you had this radar contact. He says, I know, but just after we hung up, members of the Air National Guard who were stationed at Westchester County Airport at this point kicked in the door of the tower with their guns drawn and told them, you are looking at a flock of birds, and that's it, end of story. I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but the Air National Guard left Westchester County Airport the following year. But what right did they have to burst into a civilian radar tower and threaten people? And apparently they threatened every single employee there at the time. So clearly they had it. They even admitted that the Air National Guard had this object on